Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. We've all heard the phrase, reading is fundamental. But what may not be as well known is that child literacy is in decline. This is also of particular concern for Black children. Educated adults may take the ability to read for granted, but it remains a very serious issue for upcoming generations. And tonight, we are taking a hard look at childhood literacy in our community and a local book drive effort to help address this issue. My guests are Dr. Delphia Smith, Assistant Professor of Reading and Literacy Education at Howard University, Monica Lewis, Chair of the Arts and Letters Committee for the Federal City Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and Vanessa Grant, President of the Federal City Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated. Ladies, thank you so much for joining this important conversation. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you.
So, we're going to get into the community book drive effort in DC in just a bit, but I want to first get to the heart of this issue of child literacy. In 2025 alone, there have been nearly a dozen studies or reports from Harvard, MIT, Education Week, and others that say child literacy is in very serious decline. The National Assessment of Educational Progress, and for some people it's known as the nation's report card, reported back in 2024 that 17% of Black fourth graders scored at or above the proficient level in reading,
Mhm.
significantly below the national average of 30%. And Black eighth graders, just 14% scored at or above proficiency in 2024. Dr. Smith, when you hear those numbers, what comes to mind for you?
When I hear those numbers, I've worked with NAEP data, and so it's alarming. America is in a literacy crisis, to be honest, and so it's sad in a sense because we have the science of reading, which we it's a big thing now, and so we're working towards helping our students, especially our Black and brown babies. To be proficient readers and to also increase that NAEP score because the score 17%, 14% is dismal. And so it's sad. It's sad when I hear it. So
Why do you suppose that this is happening?
well, there's a lot of factors that we need to consider. A lot of times children do not have the access or even the opportunity to engage in reading or even as it relates to books. We also need to look at our teacher preparation programs and how we restructure those to best prepare teachers to be able to teach literacy. And we also need to, just look at the school, the educational system as a whole, right? Because a lot of times when we look at our, Black and brown children, they are the ones that, they suffer the most because they are often, at schools that lack the best teachers. They are at school that lack, the resources that they would need to be successful. And so it's a number of, things that, helps to, cause the issue as it relates to the literacy crisis, as we call it.
But that's the same question when you heard those statistics that I was reciting. What was going through your mind?
Yeah, it's just like she said, it is very alarming. My daughter is actually a seventh and eighth grade teacher. She teaches math and science. And this is her first year teaching, and she has told me how surprised by the number of students that can't read. And I know it's math and science, but there's still some reading involved, and how it's
Absolutely.
taking her time to go and make sure that they understand the work because they can't read. So it's very disturbing, very disturbing.
So, what does she do when she realizes that her students, seventh and eighth graders, are not reading well or even at all? I mean,
Yeah.
is there something that she takes to the principal? Does she talk to her colleagues? I'm very curious about that.
Yeah, I think the number is three, so I don't want to make it seem like it's a lot of, but three is enough. One is too much for seventh and eighth
Exactly.
grade.
Yeah.
But she actually, they have, they're on IEPs, I think what it's called. I'm not an educator, so please
Mhm.
take that in consideration. I'm not an educator, but I
You're
think
correct.
they're on IEP, so they do
Mhm.
get some assistant, but it keeps the school, it keeps the classroom progress behind because their students are very advanced and students that are not, and they all are tested to the same level.
Mm. Monica, as it relates to this book drive, the reading is lit book drive. What's the genesis of it? And the reason I ask that is because there are so many needs in our community. You could have addressed food insecurity. You could have had a coat drive, and I know that your chapter does all of those
Yes.
things.
Yes.
But right, so yeah, don't get me in trouble. But
I was getting ready to, but good.
right, you would jump all over my head about that.
Mhm.
But why literacy? Why did you decide to create this reading is lit program?
Sure. Well, the Arts and Letters Committee is committed to amplifying all things Black art, and literature is something that is a part of Black art. We do believe that this is an important effort, one, to help our children throughout Washington, D.C., to improve their literacy skills. And, it's been said that children, read better when they see themselves and what they're reading. And so this particular initiative that we're doing is just one of the many things that the Federal City Alumni Chapter does to support children and families, throughout the district. But this initiative is dedicated to, one, not just amplifying Black authors. The books that we have put together on a curated list are all written by Black authors, but they're also books that really celebrate and inform the Black culture and the Black experience. And so we do believe that when we get books like that and put them in the hands of children, it goes to what Dr. Smith said earlier. A lot of children don't have access to books, whether it's in school or in their homes. So this initiative that we're doing aims to put the books in their hands and give them books they can take home to read with their families.
So how does it work? Because I understand that this drive goes through March, so there is some time involved. But
Yeah.
exactly how are you getting people to participate? What do you want people to do?
Sure. Well, people can find the list of books that we have put together at the Federal City Alumni website, which is bfcacdst.org. So they can see the books there. They can also follow us on Instagram and be able to scan a QR code to see the list of books. We have books on an Amazon wish list as well as bookshop.org, which is specifically dedicated to independent owned Black books across the country. So you can visit those sites and you'll be able to see our lists. And then also, as part of our economic development initiative, which President Grant can talk about a little bit, we are committed to encouraging people to buy Black. So we partner with Solid State Books DC, which is a Black-owned bookstore here in the district, to have people go in, see the list of books that we have on our list for our students, for our children, and they can purchase the books there and then leave them in a bin. So we're collecting books in person at Solid State Books DC, but also encouraging people to buy online and have them shipped to our P.O. Box.
What's the goal?
So we have a lofty goal, 900 books, but we have a chapter of 900 members, and then all of us have friends. So it's a tell a friend to tell a friend. So we do believe that we can accomplish the goal of 900 books. Thus far, we have a little over 100 that we've received at the box. We're going to be making a pickup at Solid State Books over the weekend to see how many they have there as well. But yes, in 900, if we fall short, at least we aimed high, but we do believe that we can have several hundred books collected from this particular drive.
How are you going to get these books to the young people in the district?
Mm-hmm. So we will be gathering once we end our drive in mid-March. We'll gather to sort the books out. We have The list features books from elementary, middle, and high school. So, we are trying to, hit all of our students regardless of their age, and particularly focusing on our high school students as well, because we understand that they really need to get the support when it comes to literacy efforts. But we're going to get together and we'll, have a little sorting party where we'll pack the books and then deliver them to the schools throughout the district at the end of March. March is actually Read Across America month. So we are doing an activity, a couple of reading events at some schools as well. Some members of our chapter will be going into the schools to meet with the children directly, but then we'll have dedicated days at the end of March where we will deliver the books in person.
And by the way, that QR code and the other information will be posted on the Daily Drum page along with this interview tonight after 7 o'clock. So for those of you who are interested in participating or finding out more, you can find it on WHUR.com this evening. Vanessa, Monica was talking about the economic push, the Black economic push. I want to give you a chance to talk about that real quick.
Yes, other than the books we have, in turn to Federal City Alumni Chapter, we have a BOB, which is Black-owned businesses. It's an initiative to encourage our members to buy Black, try to keep the dollars in the Black community. Our dollars leads our community at a very fast rate. So try to keep it within the Black community. The partnership or the collaboration that we have with Solid State Books, it brings expertise, community trust, infrastructure. There are other Black-owned businesses that we partner with to do different things. The purpose, like she said, is to make sure that we are supporting our kids, to make sure that they have opportunities to get books so they can read, specifically books written by Black authors. Faces look like them. Jobs in the books look like jobs that their parents may have or jobs that they want to seek. So it's very important, this initiative.
I do want to go back to Dr. Smith as it relates to this issue, because as a reader, as a person who really loved books and not just those paperback things, but I had to go back into my attic last year and hope the ceiling didn't fall in because of all of those hardback books that I had accumulated, all of those years. And certainly for me, I was blessed with parents and relatives, all of whom were educators. And so that was kind of a slam dunk for me. As I mentioned, Dr. Smith, in the beginning, I often took reading, not only the ability to read, but the ability to read for pleasure, for granted. So from your perspective, what has really gotten in the way of the modern child not seeming to enjoy reading as those of us of a different generation?
I would have to go to representation. And I think the drive that Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, the Federal City Alumni Chapter, is putting on is a great step in the right direction. Because a lot of times, there are books, but there are books it's not representative of the child or of the reader. And so it's important that we, provide the access as well as the opportunity for students to be able to engage in those types of books. And so representation is a big thing. And so a lot of times if the student, or the reader is looking at a book and he or she does not see themselves in the book or even in the characters in the book, then he or she will not be interested. And as a result, they won't be motivated to read.
So you talk about access, and I know, Federal City often serves some of the most challenged communities in DC, but there are libraries in the District of Columbia. Okay, and I'm not just talking about MLK's library downtown.
Right.
In every community, there is a library. There's a library within walking distance. That's the easy part. But what happens with opportunity And let me ask, and maybe we can talk about this on the other side too, because I'm quite sure that these days it's very rare to see children or adults, for that matter, holding a book, because they're usually holding one of
The
these.
thought, right?
Yeah, and so
Because we live in a technology advanced world, so
yeah, so
technology drives everything.
we need to talk
Um,
about that. Hold your point. We need to talk
okay.
about that because I'm interested in hearing what all of you have to say about that. We are going to take a quick break, but don't forget you can hear this and every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The Original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is coming up next on WHUR-FM. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation about child literacy in the Black community. My guests are Dr. Delphia Smith, Assistant Professor of Reading and Literacy Education at Howard University, Monica Lewis, Chair of the Arts and Letters Committee for the Federal City Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and Vanessa Grant, President of the Federal City Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated. Before the break, Dr. Smith, I was talking about impediments to reading. Access is one thing. You can go to the library. You don't have to buy a book. All you need is a library card. But opportunity, talk to me about that. And also, what are parents doing or not doing?
Well, so when it comes to opportunity, even reading as a whole, literacy as a whole, it takes a collaborative effort, right? A lot of times we, rely on the teacher to do a lot or if not most of the work. But we have to include or we have to work collaboratively with parents, with family, with community, organizations such as the D9, church organizations. And so it takes a collaborative effort for us to move especially our Black and Brown children forward as it relates to literacy. And so as a teacher, the opportunities that he or she can provide is something that I used when I was a teacher, and it's sustained silent reading or SSR method. And that's something that they can actually implement in their class. And basically what it does is it sets aside about 30 minutes in the school day for the child or children in the class to read independently. And so this actually helps to, encourage or increase reading proficiency, as well as help the reader to become confident, as well as fostering a love and an enjoyment for reading. And so it takes a collaborative effort. As a parent or as family, you can read with your child, right? And a lot of times, person think is simply just reading the words off the pages, but no, you want to have that discussion. You want to have that discourse. You want to have that conversation with the child while you're reading the book. And so you can ask questions before you even open the book. Hi, what do you think this story is going to be about? Who do you think the characters are? And then while you're reading, you can ask questions like, why do you think the character reacted this way? If you were the character, what is it that you would have done? And after the story, you can ask, okay, in your own words, tell me what you remember or what you understood from the story. And so having that conversation. And so all of this provides the child the opportunity to engage in text, in books, where they see themselves in the characters.
Talk to me, if you can, Vanessa, about your reading journey when you were a young child.
Absolutely. As we were having conversations, I was thinking that I love reading. Let me say that first of all. And I have children that love reading. One a little too much, I think, at times.
Is there
But
such a thing as reading too much?
well, when
No.
you're in college and you want to read your book instead of your schoolwork, yes, then
Oh,
there is
then
such a
there's
thing as
that.
reading too much.
Priority.
She's gonna kill me when she hears this. But my love of reading, I think, started when I was younger. And keep in mind that obviously when I was younger, we didn't have telephones. We didn't have a lot of things that took us away from, just making up games, playing with one other friends, playing outside. It was, what are you going to do? So I read. With reading, I traveled the world. I was different ethnicities. So my love of reading, I think, began there, where I can see myself in some. When I read a book and it was about a Caribbean person, I was like, oh, yes, if they had a word that was familiar to me, oh my gosh, this book is about me. So I think just the start of reading, the fundamental, let's read to take you to different places, to take you around the world. I think that helped me fundamentally love reading.
Mm.
So my journey began with I traveled and did not leave my house.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What about you, Monica?
Mhm.
What was your literacy journey like as a little girl?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Newcastle, Delaware, and I remember being so excited to be allowed to ride my bike from my house to the local library in Old Newcastle, Delaware. And, Saturday mornings, riding the bike, reading in the library, taking some books
Mhm.
home with me, having that library card, this little paper orange
Mhm.
card. It was just, you know, that was it for me. I just loved it so much.
Yeah.
And even in school, I remember, particularly in February, they used to call it I Love to Read Month, way back when. And we have the list where you'd have to like check off the number of books you read and you get prizes. So there was like the incentive there as well.
Yes.
And
Oh,
it was just such an exciting time, as a kid. And as Vanessa mentioned, we didn't have the distractions that young people have today with the cell phones, with the 24-hour
Mhm.
channels and unlimited channels, so to speak. But there are two books that's to this day stand out: Catcher in the Rye, when I was in
Mhm.
like sixth or seventh grade. And then my
Yes.
senior year of high school, the day I took my SATs, I got a copy of the autobiography of Malcolm X.
Mhm.
And that
Mm.
book for me was just everything. I left
Mhm.
Delaware, went to Howard University, and I was really the movie came out a couple of months after that. It was just that book helped me see that Malcolm X wasn't the man that some people portrayed him to be. So for
Mhm.
me, books and reading books was a way to just really learn a lot that of things that may not have been, made available to me. And
Ironically, and here's the interesting thing. Um, this is an audiobook. This is not reading, and we can also talk
Mm.
Mhm.
about that also. But I can
absolutely.
read, so I can listen to an audiobook, so I'm not worried about it. But Monica, I am literally listening to the autobiography of Malcolm X right now.
Yep.
I think I'm on, I don't know, I think I'm on chapter 8 or 9 right
That is
now,
awesome. Yeah.
and the chapters are really long. And this is the thing, Dr. Smith, when we talk about what parents can do to address this issue, and here's the context.
Mhm.
For me as a child, I was read to by both
Mhm.
parents, although mostly by my father, and I adopted his same way of reading, and introducing reading to my daughter, who is now 27 and a teacher. But one of the things that he did when he read to me, particularly when we were talking about books with characters and
Mhm.
age appropriate characters, my father did voices and he was
Mhm.
animated, and
Yes.
it was a whole show. It was a whole show. And I did the same with my daughter when I had been asked to read to very young elementary school
Mhm.
students, and I'd been doing that in Prince George's County for for many years. Uh, and the book that I always used was Alice in Wonderland, which was a book that was given to my mother by her mother back
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
1952. It was written in
Wow.
it,
Mhm.
and being the Mad Hatter, and or being the caterpillar sitting on the mushroom. No, we didn't deal with all of the imagery. That was something for the children when they became adults. We didn't get into all of that. All right,
Oh
but
my gosh.
but for them to see what
Mhm.
is being read,
Mhm.
and are parents not reading to their
Mhm.
children, Dr. Smith, anymore?
I can't say that parents aren't reading to their children anymore. Um, But a lot of times, like I said, going back to what I said, a lot of times they, consider reading, you're just reading the words of the page and not engaging the child, right? And so reading should be an exciting adventure. And so you want to be able to, engross the child in the story. And that's by asking them those specific questions, showing them the pictures, talking about the characters, putting yourself in the character's shoes, being animated, right? And so all of those things will, bring that story to life. And so it's important that, parents, I know, a lot of times they have, work maybe 2 or 3 jobs, they're busy as it relates to, finding that time to spend with their child and being able to read with or to their child. But it's important that parents, set aside a specific time to read with their child, right? Because it's a good practice, and it helps. It helps as it relates to reading. It helps as it relates to reading proficiency. And so it's important that not only parents, because parents are a child's first teacher, but not only parents, but teachers, schools, community, everyone working collaboratively, to find opportunities, right, for students to be able to engage in these texts, especially these texts where representation is evident.
Mm. What do you believe, Monica, is the long-term impact for children who do not read or do not read well? Because children who do not read well become adults who do not read well, or not at all, and there are all kinds of barriers that develop because of illiteracy.
Absolutely. Right. I mean, well, obviously, I'm not an educator, but I can say that, if you don't develop a love for, or at least a solid understanding or grasp of reading, I do think that impacts, your engagement with people. I mean, are you a learned person? Are you well-rounded? Are you well-versed in different things? I think it's safe to say that obviously education today is different than when most of us were in school. And I think that because of the changes that have happened over the, last few decades, our children are not being challenged to want to learn to read or want to learn different things about themselves. So you live in a situation where you might be closed-minded. And, you're literally, mentally and emotionally, you're kind of in a certain bubble, but you're also keeping yourself in your, community or your neighborhood, as opposed to just trying to venture out. And like, as we all said, Vanessa mentioned, she traveled the world through reading. So if children aren't reading, then are they really even thinking about dreaming of, wanting to be a physical traveler or exploring certain careers or certain opportunities? I think not reading is really limiting yourself to fulfilling your potential.
Vanessa, you were talking about your daughters, all of them being readers, even the youngest who may not be reading what she's supposed to. Funny, but still important. As a mother, when did you realize that in the literacy space with your children that you knew that you were on the right track for them?
I can't say I remember when I was on the right track. I remember things that I purposefully did to make sure that they had the confidence in reading and reading out loud. So we did do library dates. We did read stories. And when I read stories to them, I would stop so that they were anxious to know what the next thing was going to happen. And
A
I would purposefully,
cliffhanger.
yes, just like watching a movie.
Mama
So that they
cliffhanger.
would be anxious to read. Oh, well, can we read tomorrow? Well, of course, but tomorrow. So they're like wanting to read. And then as they got older, I had them read to me. So I would cook dinner and I would tell them to read to me, because what they took out of schools was reading out loud. And even as an adult, I'll take a class for work and they'll say, can we have someone read this particular section? And people who aren't confident in their reading ability won't ever raise their hand to read because they're not confident. So I can't say there's any one point in time, as much as now that they're older, they're, well, not young adults, they're adults. I'm proud that they, one, love to read themselves. One has a massive amount of books. You cannot throw a book away, regardless of how old the book is. and they read out loud. They're just very confident people when it comes to that aspect of their life.
Mm. Which brings me to another question. You said something that struck me. Dr. Smith, when you're talking about young adults, for example, and I'm talking about very young adults, or those who are about to become adults. As an educator, have you encountered young people who cannot read? And when you do, what do you do about that?
Mm. So I work with teacher education students, and all of my
Mhm,
students can read.
mhm,
But I would say, because I'm from the Bahamas, and I had an opportunity to work with an adult who was, he didn't know, he couldn't read. And so when that came, known, I actually worked with him and I helped him. And so I started from the very beginning. So I started from the foundation. We started with the letters. After letters, we started, letters and sounds. We started with words. After words, we went to sentences. After sentences, we went to paragraph, and so on. And so I was able to help him, in a sense, to be able to read basic words. But it takes practice. It takes a lot of practice. Reading is fundamental. Reading is fun. But reading is also something that you become better at it when you do it consistently. And so reading takes a lot of practice, just as writing as well. But it takes a lot of practice to be better. And so that experience, it opened my eyes a bit, because there are persons who are actually at that age, older, that are unable to read. And so I will add this. I had an opportunity to watch a documentary or movie per se entitled Sentence. And so this particular movie chronicled the life of, several adults who were actually illiterate. And it affected their everyday life. There was one who, was a waitress. She had to leave that job because she could not read what the customers ordered. And so it was sad. It was a sad movie, but it also opened my eyes as well as my students' eyes that yes, illiteracy, America is actually in a literacy crisis.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I find so difficult to understand when in this country, no matter how uneven education continues to be in different parts of this country with public schools, that and maybe I'm wrong. I just don't see any reason why
2:46 p.m.
we're well, thank you. That we're where people should not be able to read. And again,
Mhm.
I'm looking at my my own experience where even as a very young person, sometimes I would ask my father or my mother a question, and my father would say, "Well, look it up." Okay, and and he would go on to say, we have a whole library downstairs. That phrase in it of itself uh, suggests the privilege of having educated parents,
Absolutely. Hmm.
and growing up in a household of not just educated parents but educators.
Hmm.
And kind of funny, Vanessa was talking about her daughter again reading stuff that she's not supposed to, that's homework versus for pleasure. But I had at one point, seventh or eighth grade, I was so obsessed with reading, and I remember that the summer between seventh and eighth grade I read uh Jaws by Peter Benchley in 4 days. I read the book by Paul Pierce Reed, Alive, about the soccer team that crashed in the Andes Mountains, because that, again, a long time ago in the galaxy far, far away. That's one of the things that was that was kind of happening when I was a child, but I was so obsessed with it. With that is all that I did.
Mhm.
Even to the point where my mother, an educator, was saying, are you all right? Because your head is just stuck in this
Mhm.
book, and you're not doing anything else. You're not even eating. You're just
Mhm.
reading, going to the bathroom, sitting back in the living room, and eating and reading.
Reading.
And so even as a grown man now, I don't read as much for pleasure, but I'm listening, and I
Mhm.
guess that's the other question, Dr. Smith. With
Mhm.
the advent of audiobooks, is
Mhm.
that a problem for young people?
Audiobooks has been used for many years, and so no, I don't. I can honestly say it's not an issue. It's not a problem. It's just another way to engage in a story, engage in a book. But having that opportunity to be able to hold the book in your hand, be able to flip
Mhm.
those pages, is an experience like no other, right? And so yes, audiobooks are used. Audiobooks, has its place. But having that that book, that physical book in your hand, makes it all worthwhile in terms of reading. And so going back to representation, right? A lot of times, representation, like I said, it truly matters. And if the reader does not see themselves in the
Mhm.
characters or see themselves in the story, if they can't relate to the characters, if they can't relate to, some of the experiences and some of the things happening in the book, then they won't be interested in the book. And as a result, they won't be motivated to read. And so it's important for us as a collective, be it teachers, be it family, be it community, to be able to, provide those opportunities, provide those books, access, opportunities where students can actually engage in those books, where they see themselves reflected in the story and in the characters.
But so to your point, and this goes back to what Monica was saying earlier, when she was talking about one of her favorite books was, Catcher in the Rye. If I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken, there is no one in that that story that even remotely looks like Monica Lewis, sounds like Monica Lewis, is from Monica Lewis's side of town. Uh, so, so what did you see in that book, Monica? Since
Mhm.
you, as a black girl, were not
Mhm.
represented.
I was not at all, not at all. But I think for me, that book was a story of a young man trying to find himself, and I
Mhm.
think daring to be different. And so when you're coming of age and you see or hear of someone doing that, I think in certain cases, regardless of what the person looks like, if you're a young person, you've dealt with certain things, you've faced certain decisions, you might find the confidence to then take it upon yourself to do, something maybe not as crazy as he got in the book, but just, kind of,
Mhm.
push beyond the limits that people want to put on you. And
Mhm.
so for me, that book helped me kind of, think a little bit differently. And, I might be viewed by some people as a certain way, but that I can't let that keep me, in that particular place.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
but again, you can see in the autobiography of Malcolm X or reading that book, clearly, he, was a person who, can maybe relate to certain things that I may have related to. But I feel like it's funny you mentioned the audiobook. I just started listening to a book on Audible because I made a goal of reading 25 books this year.
Mhm.
And I was challenged because I was like, well, I'm not really reading because I'm listening to it, but it's helping you think. It's
Mhm.
expanding your mind. And so I think if you can, go back and forth between actually the hard copy, because I do agree.
Mhm.
It's great to turn the pages and to have that book in your hand, but it's also kind of relaxing in some ways
Mhm.
to hear someone reading
Mhm.
something, particularly if it's certain topics where you are challenging yourself to maybe think differently or look at yourself differently.
Mhm.
I'm running out of time, but I wanted to ask Vanessa, as it relates to this this push for the book drive. Reading is lit. What do you hope will be the long-term return on investment from this community activity?
Yeah. Well, we hope that it puts books that in children's hand, young adults, high school, that they may not have the opportunity to receive and or read. We hope that it shapes their love for reading and or increases or stimulates their love for reading. There's just so many things from the three of us talking or the four of us talking about our love of books and love of reading and what was the catalyst for us enjoying reading Your Father or our favorite books and what it did for us. We want that to be another child's experience as well.
Yeah.
Maybe not as old school, but definitely another child's experience. And I want to add one thing though. When I read my books, unless they describe the characters, all my characters are Black
Mm.
because that's who I'm pretty much surrounded by. So
Mhm.
unless they say they had blonde hair, blue eyes, or something like that, they're Black. So, or unless the cover has someone that looks, non-Black on it. So yeah, I try to put my background into everything that I read. So
Well, I think you've
until
given
the
us
movie.
something. I
When the
think
movie
you've
comes
given
out,
us.
it's disappointing. Sorry. Because I'm like, that is not who I envisioned.
Well, you have definitely given us something to think about with that, or should I say something to read about. So thank you all so very much, Vanessa Grant, Monica Lewis,
Thank you.
Dr. Adelphia Smith. Again, the information about the book, the reading is lit. Book drive will be on our website on WHUR.com tonight after 7 o'clock, along with this conversation. Ladies, thank you all so much. I appreciate your time. That
Thank
is the
you.
Daily
For
Drum.
having us.
Absolutely. That is the Daily Drum for this Friday, February 6th. For News Director Renee Nash, I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.